I am obsessed with Madam Web. I saw it a few weeks ago, and I just can't get it out of my mind. It's bad, obviously, but that's not what makes it fascinating. Imagine you're a doctor going out to dinner, and a person at the table next to you starts choking. Now, you have all of the experience and expertise needed to jump in and help. But if you instead just sat there and pointed and said, that person is choking and that's bad, you might go home feeling a little guilty. That's what watching Madam Web is like for me. It's bad, but it's bad in a way that activates my instinct to say, I can fix this. So that's what we're doing today. We are going to take a look at the first 10 minutes or so of Madam Web, approaching it as though it's a marble slab that we're going to chisel away at to see what we get. So a couple of rules and things to note about this process. Number one, this is not a genuine recut of the movie. In order to do that, I would need a bunch of stuff I don't have. The raw footage, the original files that they used to edit the movie with. I would love to have access to that, but I don't. I just have the same movie that you do. So that's what we're going to be working with, and that actually leads me to point number two, which is I can only use what's in the film. I can cut stuff out, I can move it around, I can manipulate it, but I'm not gonna bring in footage from other better movies and try to splice it in. The one exception would be from promotional materials for Madam Web specifically. This would be deleted scenes, blooper reels, but the only thing I'm actually interested in is from the trailer, and I think y'all know what it is, so let's just put a pin in that. Number three, this is not a tutorial. If you want to know which buttons to push, there are great resources on YouTube for that. This isn't it. This is purely for entertainment value and to see just how shiny I can make this turd. Which, funny enough, leads me to my fourth and final point. This is not an indictment of the filmmakers. Making a movie is hard, and making a good movie is even harder. And I know this because I've done it myself. In fact, the very first feature that I ever cut, not many people have seen it, but the people who have didn't really connect with it. It actually has a 3.5 on IMDb right now, which is actually lower than Madam Web's IMDb rating, which makes me feel a lot of things about myself. My personal favorite negative review would have been better if they cut 1 hour 29 minutes from this mess. The movie's an hour and 31 minutes long, so I'm guessing the one part they liked was the opening credits, which I like those too. So again, not trying to roast the filmmakers. If anything, I feel like this is probably just a case of executive meddling and just too many cooks in the kitchen. So to reflect that, whenever I am talking about the movie and the decisions that are made, I won't refer to like the director or the editor. Instead, I will refer to everyone collectively responsible for this movie being the way it is as Doc Ock, because I personally just like the image of Dr. Octopus sitting at a computer editing this movie with each of his little tentacle arms, and every single one of them have a different idea for what the movie should be, but they refuse to talk to each other. So with all that said, let's dive in. Here we are in Adobe Premiere Pro because I love setting money on fire once a month. And I've gone ahead and made these two edits here because when it comes to this prologue, there's just not much of it that I'm going to want to keep. And more than that, everything that we learn here is reiterated later in the film, more succinctly, and when it's more relevant to our main character. So I understand sometimes you want to just give some context, give some background. Honestly, with this film, it feels like it's just slowing things down. But I think we can condense this 5-minute long opening sequence into just a couple of seconds of expository dialogue, and at the same time address one of the biggest criticisms of the theatrical cut of Madam Web. Give me a second, and I'll be right back to show you what I've got in mind. Hey, look at that. I'm back, and I've got a brand new condensed opening here. And as you can see by this little thumbnail right there, that we're going to cut directly from this new opening to our present day timeline. Before I hit play, I want to just give you some insight into why I made the editorial choices I did here. So if you've seen the movie, you'll know that one of the biggest pieces of its visual language is that the camera will rotate, go upside down, spin, do all of these crazy things that you need with a gimbal. So I decided with this new opening, I would allude to that. And obviously it's not going to look as good, turning something in post like you could if it was a physical camera, but I did my best. And I think you'll agree that this condensed opening using expository dialogue to get the point across, followed by immediately cutting into our present day timeline, will flow a lot better. Let's give it a look.
Ezekiel Sims. He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
Come on!
I love it. Moving on. We've now arrived at the first, I guess what you could charitably call an action sequence in Madam Web. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. Most of it isn't very good. For me, there are really two problems here: pacing and characterization. I'm going to start with the second one first. Something that drives me crazy about modern blockbusters is how the moment the action starts, it's all about spectacle and they either completely forget about or just stop caring about the characters. Here we have plenty of spectacle, right? We've got lots of quick cuts, lots of moving cameras, but what are we actually learning about the characters? Let's just watch this quick exchange between two characters who we later learn are friends.
Cassie, I lost the pulse. I'm starting compressions now.
Ben, what are you even doing back there?
Oh, you want to come take over? I can drive.
She's not going room temp on my one.
First of all, I'm not getting friend vibes from this exchange. At best, these are two coworkers who tolerate each other. And this is supposedly the single most important person in Cassie's life, which is really sad. Secondly, I'm not an EMT, but if you are, I imagine you fall into one of two categories. You either really enjoy helping people and you find personal fulfillment in helping them out in the middle of an emergency, or you're an adrenaline junkie and you like the rush it gives you. Referring to someone who is currently dying in the back of your ambulance as room temp may be a thing that EMTs actually say. I know you have to have a dark sense of humor in order to do a job like this, but that's a bold choice for your character's fifth line of dialogue. First, really, because, I mean, it's the first time we get any sort of sense of who she is, and she referred to a human being the way you'd refer to a meal that sat out too long. And she's our protagonist. So she doesn't seem to particularly care about people, so that gets rid of that motivation. Is it that she's an adrenaline junkie? Because it doesn't seem to be like that either. She's just in traffic the way I am whenever I'm just tired and I want to get home. If she doesn't care about people, and she doesn't even get a thrill out of narrowly avoiding running into people with her big truck, why does she do this? There's nothing really for us to latch on to. She's just doing a job that she seems to hate, which, relatable, but that doesn't make her a good protagonist for your superhero movie. So instantly, it's a no for me. I don't want to keep it. We're getting rid of it. Now that that's not our first impression of Cassie, what is? Let's take a look.
How you doing back there?
You know, last time I was in a vehicle driven like this, I was being shot at.
I wouldn't want you to be homesick for the army.
Never thought I'd be this happy to be back in Queens.
What, you've never been shot at in Queens?
Dialogue's pretty on the nose, but hey, there's banter, there's familiarity, there's no implication that their patient is essentially ground chuck. This is at least a better first impression than what we had initially, so I'd say that's a winner. Now let's move on to pacing. When it comes to action sequences, you want a rhythm like anything else. You want forward movement and forward momentum, while still letting things breathe so the audience doesn't become overwhelmed. In a scene like this, the way you do that is by intercutting the exterior shots of the ambulance making its way through the traffic with the interior shots of the characters interacting. You want a healthy balance. You don't want too much of one or the other, and you definitely don't want too much of both. What you especially want to avoid is doing anything that grounds your action to a halt. Completely unrelated, let's see how Doc Ock started this scene. 3 seconds into our action scene, and it literally grinds to a halt. Any sense of forward movement or momentum? Gone. But hey, this is just how the scene starts. They're not gonna do that exactly 2 more times, right?
Come on!
Yikes. Slamming the brakes once in a scene like this is bad enough, but 3 times, it's just too much, because each time you have a beat like this in your scene, you need at least 3 shots. You need a shot of her slamming on the brakes, a shot of whoever it is getting out of the way, and a shot of her speeding back up. That in the middle of what's supposed to be an exciting action sequence. Let me just show you the kind of damage that this can do to the pacing of your scene. And I specifically want us to count the number of shots that it takes to tell this specific little mini story within this larger sequence. First shot is establishing the car coming out into the middle of the intersection. That's shot 1. Shot 2, hitting the brakes. Shot 3, the ambulance coming to a complete halt in front of the car. Shot 4, a title card. Shot 5, again, her yelling at the guy to move. And then there was a really quick cut there. We're on shot 6 of the guy acknowledging. Shot 7, the guy getting out of the way. Shot 8, she's speeding back up. And shot 9, she is back at full speed. That is 8 shots, 9 if you count the title card, just to get us moving again. 13 seconds we've been in this scene, and for 10 of them, we've been stuck in one place, in an action scene. In this second instance, she doesn't come to a complete stop, but the cab is just directly in front of her, and so even though it doesn't seem like she comes to a complete stop. All I know as an audience member is that yet again, things have slowed down, come to a halt in the middle of what should be a thrilling action scene. Granted, they're transporting a character we don't know and will never see, and it's not like they're being chased by anybody, so the stakes are already pretty low, but that's just a script problem we can't really solve in this experiment, and I doubt that there's much that we could do even if we had all the footage. This is just one of those instances where you do the best with what you've got. Because me personally as an editor, I don't think it's enough to just say, oh, the footage I got wasn't really good, or the performances weren't really good. Those are excuses. You have more control as an editor than just about anyone else during any part of the process, and that comes with a certain level of responsibility. Your job as the editor is to tell the best story you can, and you can use your editorial judgment to hide a bad performance, not cut to shots that aren't very good. The most powerful tool that you have is the ability to not show something. And I know this isn't always your decision. The director could disagree, the studio could have opinions, and you just sometimes have to make choices you absolutely don't agree with, but it's your job as the editor to advocate for those things. It's your job as the editor to advocate for your actors. Because if you make a bad edit, and if you show a line delivery that wasn't their best, the actor's gonna get that criticism, not you. With all that said, I'm gonna go off again, do some more edits, and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna show you how I made the best scene I could with the footage I have. And I'm back. I've made my edits to our little opening action scene here, keeping in mind that the two main things I'm focusing on are pacing and characterization. I'm going to start a little ways back in my little prologue, and then I'm going to let it play a little bit into the next scene, so that way we can get a general idea of not just the pacing within the scene itself, but its relationship to the scenes around it. That's another very important part of editing, is how you get from one scene to the other. So let's give it a watch.
He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
Come on! This is 210 with a 42-year-old female, code 3. Back there.
You know, last time I was in a vehicle driven like this, I was being shot at.
I wouldn't want you to be homesick for the Army.
Never thought I'd be this happy to be back in Queens.
What, you've never been shot at in Queens? Shouldn't you be in school? Who flips off an ambulance? Jesus. Kids. I'm gonna get roped in.
No, you're not. You're gonna be in the back.
Overall, I do feel like this is a much stronger version of this particular scene. I really liked this moment here where she smiles, and to me that felt like the most natural place to put the title card. Because, you know, if you're gonna cut away to do a title card in the middle of an action scene, you want it to have some sort of statement. The way that the initial scene cut it, it felt like they were just trying to hide an awkward edit. But here, it's like, okay, she's smiling. We just saw, you know, Adam Scott hanging on for dear life. She's taking a sharp corner. She's smiling. She's having fun. This is a person that, like, I could actually get on board with. And then, boom, cut to 2003, New York City. In addition to the pacing improvements we get by not having those other two instances where the ambulance stops, now when it does, it's to make a statement. This person is important, and turns out she is going to be a main character. So if you're gonna stop the ambulance, stop it for a reason. And then yeah, I really like Dakota Johnson's delivery of kids here. She's, you know, a lady in her 30s, but she sounds like a woman in her 60s. Like, she just seems like this little old lady, which honestly I feel like that's what a lot of millennials are becoming. We just feel a lot older than we actually are. I don't love how we get out of this scene. I feel like I could maybe finesse it a little bit better if I had more of the footage to work with. And so now we have this final little drive-by, and then she honks the horn, and then she pulls out the can of soda. This edit in particular was one that drove me crazy whenever I saw it in the theatrical cut. This is what it looks like in the original version. The thing that I don't like about this is that we have her hand going down and making contact, and then we repeat the same action there. To me, first of all, I wish that I had like a frame or two more on her hand on this steering wheel. I feel like if we could have gotten at least some sort of implied movement, because I mean, so yeah, we've only got 2 frames where her hand is physically on the steering wheel, and I feel like that's just not enough time to really feel like she's pressing into it. So this is one of those instances where I wish I had just a couple more frames to work with, but all the same, to me, it's you finish one movement on the cut, and then on the other side of the cut, you complete that action. Watch this again with that in mind. It's awkward. It doesn't feel right. That's why in my version, I have it so that she presses into it and then boom, her hand comes out. So let's just watch that whole thing. It's still not perfect, but I do like it a little bit better than what was there before. The rhythm of it is just off, and it doesn't work for my brain. Maybe it does for yours, but I feel like the fact that a lot of people didn't connect with this movie is that so much of it is at this really strange rhythm, on top of like all the other problems it has. Speaking of which, we come to it at last, the final nail in the coffin for Cassandra Web being a protagonist we can identify with. If you're a screenwriting, filmmaking nerd like I am, you're likely familiar with the phrase "save the cat." It's the title of a book by Blake Snyder, but it's also a generic name for a standard screenwriting trope. The basic concept is that as early on in your movie as possible, ideally within the first scene or two, you give your protagonist a moment that garners the audience's sympathy and gets them on their side, like saving a cat. The inverse of this is kick the dog, which involves a character doing something that will make the audience dislike them, like kicking a dog. This is obviously something you should reserve for your villain or antagonist most of the time. The scene we're about to look at features neither of those things and instead creates a whole new trope of its own. I define it as a moment in which our protagonist does something so profoundly confusing and inconsistent with average human behavior that it makes them seem almost alien to the audience. I call it Spurn the Child.
I'm glad I caught you before you headed back out. She's gonna be okay.
Who?
Your, patient. Her little boy wanted to say thank you.
You know what? Mr. Ben Parker here did all the work, so...
Just take it. Take it. Just take it.
That's... you... I mean...
Thanks, buddy.
You,
I'll take you in to see her. Are you all immediate family?
God.
If you have kids in your life, or if you were perhaps once even a child yourself, you should know how big of a deal it is when one of them draws you a picture. It's like winning an Academy Award for being a cool adult, except I trust a random child's judgment over the entirety of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. But that's a whole other video. Even if you don't like kids, you should at least know better than to do whatever the hell is going on here. And I don't think Cassie growing up in the foster system and thinking her mother hates her fully explains this behavior. I honestly don't know what could. It's like she's Vincent D'Onofrio in Men in Black and she's just an alien walking around in a human skin suit. I am genuinely at a loss as to how this scene, as written, made it past the first draft, let alone end up in the final cut. There is one part of this scene though that I absolutely love, and it's right at the end.
what am I supposed to do with this?
Just put it in your pocket and then throw it away somewhere else.
I can't even fold it. It's like cardboard.
I genuinely love Dakota Johnson's performance in this. It's iconic. The problem is that the character that's been written for her doesn't belong in this movie. Or any movie, really. Maybe if this was some mid-2010s indie film riff on the standard rom-com about a hot-shot, big-city paramedic who has to go back to her small hometown where she falls in love with a firefighter who likes to bake scones in the firehouse, and he gets her to open up her cold, frigid heart, but it's directed by David O. Russell, so it gets a ton of Oscar nominations. To be fair, I guess you could argue that they were trying to make her an Ebenezer Scrooge type character, and that is supported by the fact that she watches the 1951 Christmas Carol later on in the film. But if that is what they were going for, they completely missed the mark. I'm not going to get to that scene in this video, but I could go over it in a part 2 if that's something anybody wants. So comment "Bah humbug" if you want a Fixing Madam Web part 2. Or you can just say, hey, make a part 2. That works just as well. Anyway, I just wanted to point out how much I like this moment because I'm about to cut it out, but I didn't want you to think it's because I don't love it. I do. I'm just trying to make the movie better, and as fantastic as this moment is, it just makes the scene go on too long. And that's a problem that Madam Web overall has that I'll get to more in the scene after this, so pin in that. For now, I'm going to do my edits on this scene, which I've now done. So we're going to dive in, but just one quick note before I hit play. I decided to take out the really harsh transition from her slamming on the horn, so now we're going to leave the ambulance scene right after she says kids like a little old lady, and I'll explain why I changed my mind after we watch the new cut, so let's do that now.
Kids. Get roped in.
No, you're not. You're going to be in the backyard grilling with us.
I know how these things work, man.
Oh, do you? How do you know? I bet you've never even been to a baby shower.
Yeah, I'm careful not to get roped in.
I'm glad I caught you before you headed back out. She's gonna be okay. Her little boy wanted to say thank you.
That's you. I mean,
Thanks, buddy.
I'll take you in to see her.
I'm her stepdaughter.
I think she might prefer...
Yeah, it's okay, Dad. I'll see you guys back at your apartment.
Come on, buddy. Let's go see Mom.
Okay, this one is for you. This is for me. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Oh, come on. We both hate family stuff.
So yeah, I think this is a much stronger version of the scene overall. It allows Cassie to be uncomfortable and awkward around the kid without, being aggressively antisocial. The transition isn't perfect to the shot of Sydney Sweeney's character, the nurse's line of, "Are you all immediate family?" I tried to get that in here, but they layered in Adam Scott saying, "Oh my god," over it. It's just once the audio is baked in like that, there's not much you can do to remove it. Just for fun, I will show you actual footage of me trying to do the EQ on this.
Are you all immediate family? 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 Are you all immediate family?
I hope now, it makes sense why I cut out the final little moment of her being confused about what to do with the picture, because now, the fact that it ends on her looking at Sydney Sweeney and then down at the picture, the fact that we leave the scene on that naturally implies that she is thinking about this interaction that she just had. And this is the same reason why I decided to end the ambulance scene with her saying the word kids, as opposed to the quick drive-by and then her slamming on the horn. These are all going to be main characters, so I think it makes sense for each of the scenes that they're introduced in to end with Cassie having them on her mind. I think that just makes the most sense narratively. This next part was supposed to be me introducing the scene of them in the break room, but trying to puzzle this thing out has broken my brain, and honestly I'm afraid to keep going, but I'm in too deep, so let's go! Something I like to do with any scene I'm given, either when editing or if the movie hasn't been made yet, when giving feedback on a screenplay, is to look at the purpose of each scene mechanically. What does each discrete part of the scene add to it overall? What are we learning? What's going on? Here I've identified 3 discrete parts to this scene. The first part is establishing that Cassie was a foster kid.
Oh, come on. We both hate family stuff. I think I have plans anyway, so.
Plans? Since when do you have plans? You're impossible to pin down.
Well, I like to keep my options open, I might sleep in. I might go to the museum. I might walk the dog.
You don't have a dog.
I might adopt one. Return the favor.
I suspect you were a bit more of a handful than a puppy.
I don't know what you're talking about. I was a model foster kid. I peed outside and everything.
I don't know if you caught this, but they chose to establish that Cassie is a foster kid by continuing the conversation from the previous scene about the baby shower. That's already a problem for me in a way that I'll dig into here in a little bit, but for now let's move on to part 2 of this scene, which to me is about establishing that Ben is dating somebody, obviously it's supposed to be May, and to imply that Cassie has feelings for Ben.
So, I, kind of met someone.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What's this one's name? Oh. Serious. She's a lucky lady, Ben.
Thank you.
To me, this is not only the heart of the scene, this should be the end of the scene. Unfortunately, this is Madam Web as made by Doc Ock, so the scene keeps going into part 3, which, I don't know, let's just watch it.
Oh, you have a winning personality. I guess I got yours by mistake.
You're an asshole.
Here. Let's see what your future holds for you.
What if I don't want to know?
Well, it's just a cookie.
You will.
You will what?
Apparently I have no future.
Cassie, do you know what this means?
What?
It means that their printer is broken. We can't eat here anymore.
My best guess is that they're trying to put the idea of future into your head because that's what Cassie's power is. But the one line you could even point to as being thematically relevant is when she says, apparently I have no future, but she does. That's why we're watching a movie about her. So if Doc Ock is trying to establish a theme here, it's not really clear what it is. And then we have the moment at the end where Ben makes her laugh, but we already know she likes him based on how she reacted to the news about his new girlfriend. This is really a perfect example of how screenwriting is about more than just dialogue, because this scene and the one right before it with them in the hallway and the kid, the structure is just fundamentally broken. We have the conversation about the baby shower split across two different scenes, so there's no way that we can just stitch those together in a way that feels natural. And the most important part of the scene is sandwiched in between a beginning that's rehashing something we've already heard, so it feels like we're going backwards, and the end of the scene with them connecting as friends, which in my opinion should be at the beginning. Here's what that looks like in script form. So I've got Cassie and Ben walking down the hallway, and then they arrive at the nurse's station, and then we continue the conversation, which is currently at the beginning of the break room scene, here at the nurse's station, where Cassie says, I have plans, and then I added a little physical bit here where Ben keeps getting distracted by his conversation with Cassie, and the nurse is just over it. I figured that could be a fun little gag to liven up the scene, and to establish that Cassie is a priority for Ben. And then as the conversation shifts from just the baby shower to the fact that Cassie is a foster kid, I have them entering a waiting room, and I freely acknowledge that this would add additional complexity to the schedule, because that would mean that you would have to either build a new set or source a new location, but in my mind, you could just literally use the location that you have with the hallway and just move them down there. I just broke it up here with the waiting room to give you a sense that we are starting something new and that we're having a new moment. And a benefit of having it structured this way is that we've established that Cassie grew up in the foster system right before she has to interact with a kid. So even though that interaction still would have been painful, at least those two ideas would have been next to each other in a way that made some sort of sense. A final benefit of structuring it this way is now we are putting all of Cassie's baggage that has to do with her past, we've put it all together. We've grouped it together into these two scenes. So now that leaves us free to jump right into the break room scene. You just have them sitting in the break room, Ben opens the fortune cookie, and even though I'm not a huge fan of this chunk of the scene, it at least makes more sense at the beginning, because now, after Ben makes her laugh, we could have had the quiet, comfortable beat between them, right before Ben drops the bomb on her that he's dating someone else, and then there can be another quiet beat between them, but this one is less comfortable, implying that, oh, there are feelings here that aren't being said. That's interesting, that's engaging, and that's relatable. We've all been in situations like that before. So anyway, that's how I wish they would have structured it in the script, but again, not anything I can do about that. I've just got to do the best with what I've got. Okie doke, I could not structure the scene the way that I wanted to by moving the end of the scene to the beginning. So in instances like this, best you can do is cut into the scene as late as you possibly can and cut out as early as you possibly can, ideally on something that is still thematically relevant that will either move the story or the characters forward.
It's for you. This is... Anyway, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
I think I have plans anyway, so.
Plans? Since when do you have plans? You're like impossible to pin down.
Well, I like to keep my options open, you know? I might sleep in. I might go to the museum. I might walk the dog.
You don't have a dog.
I might adopt one. Return the favor.
I suspect you were a bit more of a handful than a puppy.
I don't know what you're talking about. I was a model foster kid. I peed outside and everything.
So, I, kind of met someone.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What's this one's name? Oh. Serious. She's a lucky lady, Ben.
Thank you.
I don't know about you, but ending the scene on that moment right there, on the silence between them, establishes the theme for both Cassie and the movie as a whole. This is a film about someone who's lonely and is desperate to connect with other people, but she doesn't know how. That makes her the perfect protagonist for a movie about someone who becomes a surrogate mother to 3 teenagers. There's an interesting story that could have been told here, but at some point in the process, or hell, throughout the whole process, that got lost, or it was drowned out by corporate mandates and executive meddling. Honestly, I don't know where Madam Web went wrong, but I can see where it could have gone right. And even though Madam Web isn't a good movie, it is a good bad movie, and I think if you go in with the right expectations, surrounded by friends and whatever best gets you inebriated, you could have a good time too. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go watch Morbius.